McDonald's or McPhail? Everyone asked this question when the restaurant had to recall many items from stores because of how badly they flopped, or worse, became a public safety hazard. Let's get into all of McDonald's dirty laundry. This story starts all the way in Timaru, a peaceful island in New Zealand, where the local youth enjoys gorging on a spectacular side from Ronald known as all-chicken McBites. Now, I know you're familiar with stuff like Hot Shots, which honestly adds that comfortable munching factor to any good fast food meal. But this one ended up almost being a nationwide enabler of salmonella. Timaru's McDonald's served a customer, like any other that they've been serving really, known as Keegan McWay Jones. Mr. Jones excitedly went over to the nearest McDonald's, hoping to get more of the same goodness he's always been enjoying, just like the millions of other people that trust the Big Mac machine to keep churning out safe, affordable, and appetizing fast food. We've all been there, right? Anyway, Keegan's night was going as planned. He ended up ordering the Chicken McBites, eager and ready with a roaring appetite. His hunger died faster than a honeybee after a fresh sting, but at least the bug gets a good last meal. Keegan had to deal with raw meat right on the plate. He complained thoroughly on social media about the quality of the food that was served to him, and it kind of went viral. Everybody loves to clown on someone's mess up after all, especially when the someone in question is a multi-millionaire franchise the world over. Anyway, this kind of shined a light on some production issues that McDonald's was having with their supplier in the area. The reason I say that is because otherwise, it's actually pretty odd to recall and end an entire product for one complaint, unless there were already concerning things going on behind the scenes. Either way, that was all that New Zealand would see of the Chicken McBites. The first example alone teaches us that when something becomes woven into the social fabric of our country's diet like McDonald's has, we tend to look at it only with rose-colored glasses. Hence, few of us remember the uglier moments of the franchise, so let's continue the list to find out more. Speaking of McDonald's sides, they really don't hit the same way without those iconic dips, do they? They've really rolled out some great ones over the years, and in 2021, we got the sweet and sour. I know you go just as crazy for barbecue and hot mustard, all the classic flavors we've grown up with, but we gotta keep an open mind for new ideas too, right? Hey, most of the people welcomed it with open arms, and they were glad they did so too. The sauce was a hit. Suddenly, the right way to have a nugget was to have it drenched in sweet and sour dip. If you don't believe me, just check their dipping sauce rankings. The dip toots its own horn, proudly sitting in 4th place. It beats out some dips that have been around since the 90s, man. That's how you know you have a real winner on your hands. That is, unless you were in Ireland in November 2021. Why were you denied the glory of a wondrous sweet and sour dip, completing that savory flavor profile, escorting you to food heaven with every bite? In November, McDonald's decided to pull their new showstopper from the Irish market entirely. The company had this one batch that used mustard in the manufacturing, though the sauce is made of syrup, water, spirit vinegar, soy sauce, and apricot puree. Turns out, this gave it a false expiry date, and it ended up being a potential public health risk to people who were allergic to mustard. As a result, it had to be recalled in heavy numbers, some of the largest the company has ever seen. In hindsight, the Robinson's Fruit Shoots issue wasn't really that bad when you compare it to some of these other travesties. Some backstory on the drink before we start. This is a favorite of many kids and teens both in America and the United Kingdom alike, and it was as widely consumed as Kool-Aid or Gatorade. More even, in some areas. Something gets around that much and you start to think of it as safe without a second thought. No caution, right? Everyone else is having it without a care in the world. Plus, it comes from Ronald McDonald. It has to be safe. Unfortunately, that wasn't really the case. While there wasn't anything wrong with the drink itself, some packaging issues did lead to a recall in the United Kingdom during 2019 when it became a potential choking hazard. The last thing you want to do is die because of a Robinson's Fruit Shoots bottle. I mean, personally, there are better ways to go. The Food Standard Agency in the United Kingdom became aware of this packaging fault, which was only present in the 200 milliliter bottles. The spout on these things could come off and you could end up with it stuck in your throat. Lots of customers who bought them were asked to refund them, and McDonald's had to do damage control at the start of July when it did recall a lot of these, though it was really too late in retrospect. Still, they've had a lot worse, and the next one on the list is a testament to that. The Fruit Shoots were just one kind of bottle that had a problem, but salads from 3,000 entire outlets are a bit of a publicity nightmare to clean up for anybody. The funniest part about the center of the mess being salads is that these were actually a genuine attempt by McDonald's to launch a healthier line of meals. Their marketing team has been pretty horrible in this aspect. Back when most of us were in our teens, it wasn't so clear, but now the side effects of all those Big Macs are kicking in. Set the calendar all the way back to 2018, because that's where our story takes place this time. McDonald's salads started a widespread food panic among the locals when not a dozen, not two, not even three, but 500 people came down with one of the nastiest gastrointestinal illnesses you can catch: cyclosporiasis, which is actually caused by a parasite known as Cyclospora. That's enough of a biology lesson. Let's get to the meat of the issue. The rundown on this is basically that the effects are an incredible amount of nausea, like I'm talking the kind you get after the worst hangover of your life: vomiting, diarrhea, stomach pain, enough to make grown men crawl. It's just not a good time. 24 out of those 500 ended up being hospitalized. And if there was any silver lining to this sadness, then it was that the cases people caught were mild and not severe, like the 24 that ended up booking it to the emergency room. Thanks to the Illinois and Iowa health departments and their fast work, next to godliness, I tell you, they found out that the romaine lettuce and carrots the salads had were causing the issue. From the Midwest to the Pacific, in at least 14 states, McDonald's stopped the selling of these items and had to recall them. They also ditched Fresh Express, who was their supplier. Not the healthiest salad you've had, right? If you thought 3,000 was a big number, you'll lose your head over hearing 32.6 million Happy Meal fitness trackers in 2016. Man, when I tell you this was a pain in every sense of the word, trust me. After all, even 1 million recalls is a top 5 worst-case scenario for any company. We're talking 30 times that, at least. As you all know, despite the relationship we have built up with McDonald's over the years as a source of comfort food, that food is only good for relaxation and nothing else. McDonald's has played a pretty influential role in public health, but not in a good way overall. That does count as bad press, though, and despite the age-old adage, that isn't always a good thing. McDonald's has tried to elevate its image as a spreader of obesity and higher cholesterol rates for a long while, and the fitness trackers were only the latest addition in the pipeline to a cleaner, greener image, though how they plan to keep that up and still serve mass-produced burgers is beyond me. These bands were known as the Step It bands, and they were sold widely in the United States as part of a Happy Meal toy. They were meant to help kids get more active, but they actually ended up causing skin issues because of the material. 70-plus complaints put them on the radar of the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and as a result, almost every band sold was recalled. Maybe if they just put a bit more effort into quality testing before giving it the green light. You'll never find a bigger nugget head than me, and if you're anything like me, then you definitely know what I'm talking about. This is exactly why it's so awfully heartbreaking when you find out the stuff in your nuggets is even worse for you than what you originally thought. Sitting there with a 10-piece thinking all you need to worry about is the oil, the additives, the artificial flavorings, the modifications? Think again. The worst thing you had to worry about in 2015 in Thailand was plastic if you were eating nuggets religiously back then. Not just in Thailand, even customers in Japan ended up finding little shards of the icky stuff in their meat, which is honestly the last thing your appetite needs. A hair? Fine. You feel hungry enough, and you can ignore that, though I hope most of you wouldn't. But plastic? You gotta draw the line somewhere, right? Some of those reports even complained about vinyl pieces. This ended up leading to an entire public fiasco where people's trust in the McNuggets plummeted all the way to rock bottom. Suddenly, everyone was thinking 3 times before happily placing their order at the counter. An IMZ pharmacy technician, Justice Dodson, also posted a TikTok where he held the nuggets under a microscope to see what's what, and ended up finding plastic fragments. That was in 2021, and in the USA, just in case you were thinking this was an Asia-only issue. Despite how they try to be transparent with their customer base in response to criticisms such as, "We don't even know what they put in the stuff." McDonald's is fake food, and much more. It seems they fall flat where it counts. Though I guess opening the business day with a big fat smile next to plastic nuggets for $2 isn't a good look at all. Either way, McDonald's ended up recalling 1 million nuggets back to the factories. Quite the McMess, right? Take away LeBron from the Lakers, and what are you left with? Take away Messi from Barcelona. How heavy is their lineup, really? Similarly, if it ends up having to recall an extreme amount of your beef products like hamburgers, quarter pounders, and your chicken Big Macs too, what's McDonald's without its best? Questions like these are discussed to this day, but for now, let's get into why McDonald's would recall the Brons and Messis of its menu. The answer to that question lies in one of the oldest stories in the restaurant industry: a bad supplier. McDonald's was dealing with Shanghai Husi Food, which was a food processing plant that was pretty dominant in the Chinese and Japanese scene. They would, however, violate several industry standards, and they were all the ickiest violations too. Stuff like handling tons of meat with naked hands or picking up that same meat from a floor and putting it right back onto the line. After a lot of cases of food poisoning, the Shanghai Municipal Food and Drug Administration decided to take matters into their own hands. They realized McDonald's supplier was peddling expired, repackaged meats. Despite this protein problem, McDonald's actually has a more decent track record than other places when it comes to cleanliness in terms of food. While your grandmother may share Facebook posts about how they put pink slime in their food, the meat is the genuine article 8 out of 10 times. This is one of those rare too where it'll send you to the toilet. Needless to say, that was the end of Shanghai's days. But McDonald's stopped selling nuggets and beef products in 500 stores in Japan. It also got rid of any chicken products in central China, and their sales went down by 7.4% following the fiasco. Despite how we all have fond memories of cracking open a Happy Meal bag for the wondrous mystery of the toy we'd find inside, not all of them have been so happy or wonderful. The Happy Meal whistles, for one, were not anything to celebrate if you got them, even if kids would blow on them happily without a care in the world. That's why we have adults to quality check and test these things before they put them out into circulation. But I guess someone at McDonald's didn't get that memo. In 2014, McDonald's, as it so often does, wanted to cash in on the hype of the latest trend, which was Hello Kitty. These were released as part of a 40th anniversary collection for Hello Kitty and included a 3-inch whistle with the figure holding a lollipop, and it came with detachable pieces. The thing is, when you'd inhale to blow the whistle, there was a decent chance the detachable part could come off and become a choking hazard. That's more or less the report the Consumer Product Safety Commission got, and after seeing the obvious violation, ordered 2.3 million units recalled in the United States and Canada combined. McDonald's ended up actually bringing back 16 million. Whistles are supposed to be a sound of happiness, like home time or recess, not a prelude to a bad choking attack. Though luckily, while this issue has recurred a few more times other than just this, for the most part McDonald's is usually in the green with their toys. These mistakes might make you think that they're a bit incapable when it comes to creating safe toys, but they make competent ones more often than not. Coming to probably the biggest offender on the list for me personally because, as many of you may be able to relate, Shrek's not something I play about. Unfortunately, McDonald's didn't have that same sentiment when it released the collectible Shrek Forever After glasses in 2010. These glasses weren't really the most elaborate product you could get from McDonald's, but they had all the characters you loved from Shrek. Fiona, Puss in Boots, the big man Shrek himself, and of course, who could ever forget Donkey? The thing that ended up causing these to flop horribly is that the glasses had some toxic materials, which were worse than anything you could find in Shrek's swamp. Stuff like cadmium, for example, which is a heavy-duty metal that's also pretty toxic, was found in high amounts in the Puss in Boots glass. This metal hurts you in the long term, giving you anything from liver damage to a bad nervous system. So unless you enjoyed Russian roulette with your life, it was a wise idea to throw these. it was an even wiser idea to recall all the glasses possible, which is exactly what the higher-ups at McDonald's decided to do. Worries particularly peaked when they started considering the effects it could have on their biggest audience, young children. Did you know only 8 touches were necessary for exposure to reach dangerous levels? How quick do you think it takes a kid to hit that quota? Warnings were issued, and by the time they recalled them, 9 million had already been passed onto the wider world. Either way, they ended up fetching back 13.4 million of these cups. If you ask me, pretty bad way to handle Shrek merch. Luckily, the rest of their Shrek-related ventures have been pretty decent. It's one of the most famous movies of the 2000s, you gotta do it justice, and the rest of their products definitely did. Remember how we talked about how McDonald's loves shaking off its self-made reputation of being an unhealthy source of bad gut health? Yeah, who would have thought they'd mess up apples too? Yet that's exactly what they did with the apple slices they added to the menu in 2004. These were made a default for Happy Meals later, and McDonald's ended up having a substantial chunk of the market with it selling 1/10 of all sliced apples in the country. This also helped triple apple consumption, so by all means, they racked an impressive resume to help combat that nasty rep. However, apples do turn sour, and so does this story. The production equipment involved in these sliced apples ended up testing positive for listeria, and the suppliers, Miss Bay and ReadyPack Foods, had to recall 293,488 cases and, furthermore, 296,224 individual bags of fruits from many fast food chains, McDonald's being one of them. Isn't this like the 4th time on the list we've had supplier-related scandals? While most of those happened later than the one we're discussing now, you would think this apple apocalypse would teach them a memorable lesson. Luckily, nobody ended up catching the disease, but they did remove any apple slices that were good until August 20th, 2012. In a statement from the company, they announced a complete cutoff from their suppliers. The only reason this didn't end up being a top 10 health violation scandal up on the New York Times is because they got lucky. Nobody got sick, after all. Doesn't mean they didn't come dangerously close. You order a pepperoni pizza, you'd be pretty nettled if it ended up not having any pepperoni on it, right? At best, it's just the fault of a careless worker. At worst, it's false advertising. The worst case here is exactly what happened with McDonald's Brazil when they introduced their latest spin on the classic burger formula. The McPicana burger was supposed to be meaty goodness that was tailored specifically for the Brazilian market. They did their homework and found out that the audience here really loves its local premium cuts of meat, one of which was picana. It's been a mainstay of Brazilian cuisine for decades, but it hasn't really taken off in an accessible fast food format. McDonald's thought, hey, here's yet another untapped market, and got to work. What good is a market if you don't keep costs low, though? And what better way to lower costs than to not include the premium meat you're actually advertising? See, if I sold you veal stew without stew, I'd rip you off for $50 extra and save a lot more selling you cheap beef. They had a pretty nice save in mind when the Brazilian people gave them some pretty fair hatred for selling them a false bill of goods. McDonald's said it was actually trying to show off its new picana sauce flavor, not a new patty. My question is, though, how do you make a fact like this that unclear? It's a little beyond me, and a little beyond the poor people expecting picana patties in their quarter pounder too. For McDonald's, what in October 2022 in Melbourne, Australia can never happen again? It was a financial crisis that proved that while McDonald's is a global giant, even successful brands can misread consumer demand. That's because if just 2 years later another batch of plastic-filled hash browns popped up, it would be one publicity nightmare that McDonald's may not bounce back from. After all, this is starting to be a pattern with them. We sign up for meat and potatoes, not plastic and expired meat. And just like so many times before, the supplier was once again the issue. Seriously, how many suppliers do they deal with in a year, and why is there always one bad egg among them? It can't be that hard for a brand like theirs to keep things, safe for human consumption. Either way, the culprit this time besides McDonald's was Simplot Australia. They called up McDonald's one dandy morning, just a really casual, Hey, not sure if this is a good time? Hope the wife and kids are okay? There might be plastic in our food. Yeah, the same food we're selling. Call. A very normal occurrence for any business, right? Luckily, they were at least a bit competent about catching the contamination. Before this could really spread over the country and affect people, McDonald's managed to take hash browns off the menu and recall several products that were sold wherever they could from the batch that did get out. Maybe their response was so fast because they have a lot of practice with plastic in their food now? If it isn't a supplier-based contamination issue, it's a choking hazard that they didn't catch onto until somebody either choked or a regulatory body caught onto it. The 1982 Playmobil Happy Meal toys were exactly like that, and they ended up being recalled for the same reasons as many others on the list. There were 4 of these Playmobil toys, and the figures could individually be taken apart and reassembled. This was true for each figure, but unfortunately, what they did not realize is that while figures you can pull apart and put back together are really fun, interactive, and can keep a kid glued, they are also unsafe for little kids. Why? Because kids are liable to eat anything in sight. Paper? No worries. Mud? Been there, done that. Bugs? Probably. Point being, you don't leave kids alone with things they can swallow. Eventually, they kept getting complaints from parents about these concerns, and the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission may have overseen these. McDonald's decided to recall them on their own, though. Since it did decide to take them back as a precaution, luckily, their rep wasn't harmed too badly. McDonald's ended up recalling most of Playmobil's back to home base, where it could manufacture yet another item to either harm kids or their diet. But hey, at least the sundaes are still great. It seems like the end of the 90s was a cursed decade for McDonald's because in 1995, right at the start of the new year, they found themselves stuck in another choking hazard. This time, it was whistles that were included in the Barbie and Hot Wheels Happy Meals that were going on as part of a promotion. Both of those brands were making waves, so it was only natural for McDonald's to want to capitalize on some of that. This was before the Hello Kitty whistle scare, which happened for the same reason. But you'd think they'd actually follow up on their statements to the public and be more on the prowl for these things. The whistles this time were plastic and they had the shape of tubular toys, but again, there was a detachable piece that was inside the whistle that, if it came off, could get lodged in the throat of a child pretty badly. There was at least one documented case of a child that actually ended up in the hospital because of this, and several children likely did swallow the pieces. The usual suspects rolled in this time as well, like the Product Safety Commission and outraged parents everywhere. Product liability became the talk of the town as a result, since McDonald's had just recalled 2.3 million whistles in cooperation with regulators. Kids that grew up in the late 90s or early 2000s may remember the famous play places that were there in most McDonald's branches. Not really a playground, not really just a ball pit either, but a perfect middle ground in between both. This was what you would think of when it came to cheering up your kid. Most parents would pick out a relaxing Friday to roll the car out of the garage and drive their kids to a McDonald's, content watching them play in these play places, watching an hour or two fly by. The kids would love them too, and of course, if they were going to play, they may as well eat too. The play places had a way of working up your appetite. To be fair, at that age, anything works up your appetite. The parents loved them too because it meant they could enjoy a meal in silence for once. Originally, these just popped up in 1 or 2 choice outlets, but they soon became a feature of all McDonald's branches. They wouldn't last long, though, because between the unsanitary and smelly nature of the things and the dangerous structural issues, play places may as well have been mini plastic traps for kids to fall into. Also, around 2010, kids really started getting more into electronics than going out to work up a sweat. Eventually, play places were something McDonald's let go of and recalled many, amidst a slew of injury reports, maintenance costs not being worth it, and them gaining a rep for being lethal for your nose. McDonald's had to dial it back down with their McFlurry spoons too. These spoons were convenient for both you, me, and McDonald's, but the reason it was a neat little situation for them was because they were really easy to make in bulk. Of course, if you do get that kind of advantage, chances are, more often than not, you're cutting corners where they aren't meant to be cut. For McDonald's, this was in the durability of these spoons. The material they were made out of was just really snappable, like you could bite down on it and it would snap in two. Say, what do you think happens if your spoon breaks mid-bite in your mouth? Bad flavor? Sour aftertaste? Possible, dare I say, choking hazard? I'm as tired of hearing about it as you are, but it just seems to be something they can't get rid of. They ended up recalling 2.5 million McFlurry spoons, and it was a big pain, as is any recall. Now, they only received complaints and reports of spoons breaking constantly from customers, but luckily we don't have any legitimate documentation of anybody actually choking or meeting an early grave, luckily thanks to them. Still, maybe bring your own cutlery the next time you step into a McDonald's, or at least make sure you treat that spoon really gently in case you do end up using theirs. Despite the setback with the McFlurry spoons, McDonald's product mishaps were far from over. In fact, safety concerns seemed to become a recurring theme, especially when it came to their promotional items. While faulty cutlery might pose a minor inconvenience, other misfires involved a much bigger risk, particularly when children's products were in the mix. Let's go back to 1995, which seems to be one unlucky decade for our beloved McDonald's. They were coming out with all sorts of things, and they definitely had their ideas. One of those was toy mobile phones. Hey, phones and communication devices seem to be the next big wave. Why not make a little dough on the side as an after effect of the changing times? McDonald's didn't get to where it is today without having a knack for smelling profit. Anyway, these phones were, as you guessed it, a part of Happy Meal promotions that they had going on during the time. These toy phones could break easily, and they also had detachable pieces, namely one plastic antenna on the mobile phone that came off far too easily than it should have. You know, for a franchise that's all about making food and products for kids and teenagers mostly, they sure do seem to miss the mark on a lot of important safety standards. Either way, McDonald's caught wind of the issue and decided to recall as many of the toy phones as it could. This number kept piling on until it hit 8 million, and this string of damage control started after several parents complained about the risks of these. At least this incident, just like many of McDonald's mess-ups, inspired much better and stricter safety regulations for products like these. The McDonald's fails have not ended yet as we come to the one that happened in 2017. We were a victim to their newest item, the Shamrock Shake straws. These were made to promote their namesake, the Shamrock Shake, but if you ever thought technology hadn't gone far enough, you may reconsider that after this. It hired the team that worked on Google's Project Ara, and they ended up making something called Straw. Yes, that is the name, and no, I'm not kidding. The whole thing stands for Suction Tube for Reverse Axial Withdrawal, and it was meant to give the optimum drinking experience for the chocolate Shamrock Shake. This was one of their secret menu items, but it should have stayed a secret because nobody wanted it to lead to this overly complex straw that could literally break apart. It had 5 ports overall, with 4 on the short leg of the straw and the 5th on the bottom. And despite being available for only 2 days with just 2,000 straws put out into the country, it still managed to cause a scare. This extra-engineered travesty actually was yet another potential doomsday for your throat, as you could find yourself choking to death, gasping for breath, if any of the unnecessary parts in this managed to come apart and ruin your day. Hey, as long as you get both the chocolate and the mint portions in equal proportion, right? Plus, if you struggle with drinking the shake, maybe just take the cap off and use your mouth? Just food for thought. And your general safety. Our list ends with a very recent addition to the ever-expanding list of McDonald's train wrecks. We have Grimace drink mugs, which were pulled back due to safety concerns because they had an unusually maniacal level of lead content in the paint used in the mugs. See, you would think lead paint was a thing of the distant past, definitely not something you would see in 2023, but nonetheless, here we are. These mugs were supposed to be a promotional effort for Grimace, who is one of the brand's most iconic characters and has made them more than just a pretty penny. Of course, they were aimed squarely at kids as collectibles that you could brag about your friends to if you managed to gather all of them. They had to recall 1.7 million drink mugs, and this is not really the first time their collectibles have had high levels of lead either. Even the 1997 McDonald's Land ones had the same issue. But it seems McDonald's would rather keep repeating these patterns hoping people don't find out, rather than just not using lead, or harmful manufacturing practices, or better testing and regulation. Luckily, nobody had to actually suffer any side effects from the lead, but it was still a dangerous fact to be sleeping on knowing your kids were religiously collecting anything McDonald's put out. Talk about some McFails. What do you think is the worst publicity disaster for our beloved McDonald's? We had a lot of fun making this list for you. If you enjoyed our recount of this list, like and subscribe for more.